So the Jupiter-Pluto alignment of 2020 will occur on April 5th. We could see it already is in effect since the beginning of this year and will make a number of conjunctions from April through November of 2020. So it correlates very much to the USM manufacturing index from 1948 to 2018. The conjunction is extremely bearish. You could see as it's coming into conjunction now, the manufacturing index gets impacted very hard. And this is what we can expect going into the second half of 2020. We will see a major crisis or significant drop at critical low levels in U.S. manufacturing. Now, this is important because even though China has the second largest economy, U.S. manufacturing is still larger than Chinese manufacturing. Believe it or not, yes, even at 8%, the United States economy at 8% of manufacturing, meaning 8% of the U.S. economy's manufacturing is still larger than China's economy at 53% manufacturing. So this is very important, very significant. It's going to have a massive, massive impact. Jupiter-Pluto aspects the S&P 500 index from 1950 to 2020. Note here, as we're coming into the conjunction, right, you can see this is where we're seeing this sort of melt up. So the melt up and then the conjunction occurs here. Then shortly after the conjunction, we see a significant drop. So here's the melt up going into conjunction. We're right about here now, getting somewhere, and then the conjunction will occur in April and then continue going back and forth. Jupiter-Pluto will continue to conjunct, and then the last conjunction occurs in November, shortly after the U.S. election, and then when Jupiter-Pluto begin to separate, that's when we'll see a significant drop historically with the S&P 500 index. Jupiter-Pluto aspects to the volatility for the S&P 500, 1990 to 2020. So this is the VIX, the level of volatility we see with the markets. So we could see here that volatility increases as the Jupiter-Pluto comes into conjunction and peaks shortly after Jupiter-Pluto conjunct and begin to separate. So we're going to see right now volatility has been low, but that's about to change. Volatility is now increasing. If we haven't seen it yet on the VIX, we soon shall. So there's a market melt up. As the market continues to melt up, there'll be more and more volatility as we get further into this year. So what we're looking at here is peak bullishness and dovishness. Dovishness meaning the policies of the central bank will be very accommodating in the first half of 2020. You can see this build up, and this is using the Bradley long-term financial forecast modeling 3602. So my projection based on this Bradley, we're already past this number, but my projection was 3602 on the S&P 500. We're very close to that number. So people ask, does this mean the market will correct? I don't think so. I think maybe we could see the market sort of muddle along and then really begin to take off again as we get closer to the eclipse. Generally, prior to eclipses, a month or two, generally a month and a half prior to an eclipse, which we'll be having in late June, we see markets begin to move. And they generally move up. It's very bullish. Eclipses are extremely bullish for markets. And then markets peak. There's a lag effect. They peak after the eclipse. So, this period of unprecedented Fed generosity will end during the Jupiter-Saturn-Pluto alignment for the recent gains of the S&P 500 on the back of the Goldilocks December payrolls in January, U.S.-China Phase 1 deal, along with the passive January 29th policies of the Federal Reserve will create peak bullishness and dovishness. So this is sort of like sell into strength strategy. Again, we're looking at 3602 on the S&P 500. Okay, so what are the mundane impact of the Jupiter-Pluto alignment on the economy and markets? Jupiter-Pluto correlates with capital formation and the collapse of the monetary system due to continual credit expansion and resulting unsustainable rapid price increases. So the crack up boom is what we need to look at here in terms of a real possibility. What we saw happen in Venezuela recently, Argentina, we saw it happen back in 1931. We had a crack up boom. From 1929 to 1931 was this crack up, boom effect. So Jupiter-Pluto alignment, 2007. We notice here that if we look at this 6 occasions over the past 50 years where the 3-month treasury yield exceeded that of the 10-year treasury yield, economic recessions followed, commencing with an average of 311 days after the initial signal. So 311 days after the initial signal would be somewhere about now. If we look at what recently transpired, March 22nd, 2019, when that inversion occurred. And if we look here, the Great Recession, by the way, so let's go back to the Great Recession. Here's the inversion before 2008 recession. Here's the inversion. We notice here Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. The Bloomberg graph is showing how the yield curve inverted in 1989 here, in 2000 here, and in 2006 with recessions prompting starting in 1990, 2001, and then 2008 with the Jupiter-Pluto alignment, we had the Saturn-Pluto alignment followed by the Jupiter-Pluto alignment. So the fact that we're seeing what happened here in 2008 play itself all over again. We had a Jupiter-Pluto, we saw the inversion, we saw the recession. Actually, the literal date of the recession is on December 12, 2007, when the Federal Reserve began to invoke emergency policies of intervention into the credit system and into the markets. So you could see it's almost the exact conjunction. And we're now entering the next one in April. So we're going to see a replay here. This is March 22nd, 2019, when this inversion happened. So it is imminent. It is coming. You do not have much time. The Jupiter-Pluto alignment in Capricorn 2020. So again, we saw here the beginning of the recession actually started officially on December 12, 2007, the Jupiter-Pluto alignment. It correlated with this inversion ahead of the storm. And look at here. We see the Jupiter-Pluto alignment here. I'm sorry, I said April 1st. It's April 5th, 2020. And this is where we are today. And this, if you compare the movement of the NASDAQ in 2019 to the NASDAQ with 1999 to 2001 at the dot-com bubble, we're like right about here. Now let's talk about the Jupiter-Saturn alignment. We're going to go back and review all of these and put them all together, but I want to go through all the slides as quick as possible so we can get to the meat of it. And that is, where are things going to be this time next year in 2021?